Hello and welcome. I've been sitting with this episode for the last few days trying to find the best way to share what's been on my mind recently. So, whether this is your first time here or you're back for more, I'm really glad you're here. And I want to ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly connected? Not only to your friends or family, not your phone or anything like that. I mean, connected to the earth beneath your feet, to the food on your table, to the rhythm of the day as God designed it. When was the last time you even thought about connection in that way? For most of us, it feels, kind of distant, like something our great grandparents knew, but we've somehow lost that along the way, right? And I think that loss is costing us more than we realize. For one, it's costing us our health. The chronic exhaustion, the weight we can't shake no matter what we try, the diseases that seem to come out of nowhere, and it's costing us our peace, the anxiety, the restlessness, the nagging sense that something's missing, that we're running on empty even when we're doing everything right. And maybe, just maybe, hear me out, it's costing us our closeness to God, because somewhere along the way we stopped seeing him in the world he made, and we stopped participating in the rhythms that he designed for us. So, if you've been maybe feeling that tug lately, that sense that maybe modern life isn't working, that there's got to be another way to do what you're trying to do, that you weren't made for this kind of exhaustion and stress, you're not alone. And this episode is for you. So today, I want to take you on a journey back to the farm where I first felt what it meant to truly participate in creation. Through the loss of that rhythm when we moved back to the UK, and into the awakening I'm still walking through. This isn't about just one thing. It's about remembering who we were meant to be and made to be. Not consumers, but stewards. And not spectators, but shepherds of the earth that God entrusted to us. So let's dive in. Are you ready? Okay. So, I've told you a bit about our time on the farm in Alberta. That moment, walking out to the barn when I felt God's presence so strongly I could barely breathe. But what I haven't told you is what it's actually felt like to live in that rhythm day to day. We raised and grew most of our food. We had chickens, and eventually we added pigs and all that kind of stuff to it. We had a garden as well. And every season had its own cadence. Spring was planting, summer was tending, fall was harvest, winter was rest and planning. What's expected. It wasn't romantic all the time. It was hard, muddy, exhausting work. But it was real, and it was sacred, and it was fulfilling. Now, here's something you might not know. We started out as vegans. That was our dream. Well, our dream was to get a farm, but we were vegan at the time, so we wanted a vegan farm and do it really well and have a big market garden, We were going to grow all of our own vegetables and live gently on the land and avoid harm. I was drawn to it for all the reasons, drawn to veganism. We kept being told to eat the veggies, eat the rainbow, remove everything else, and you'll be healthy forever. And, they have the argument that animals don't want to die. Can't argue with that. It's strong, really strong. I believed it. I wanted to be part of something compassionate, something that didn't cause suffering, and I was hoping veganism would also bring me health and longevity and peace. But that's not what happened. We had chickens, and they were happy and healthy and well-fed, and they laid eggs, beautiful fresh eggs, every single day, but we didn't eat them. We were vegan, so we would cook them and bring them back to the chickens every day. But one day I was standing in my kitchen one morning making my usual vegan egg breakfast that I always used to do. And I was collecting up the tofu, the turmeric, the black salt, the soy milk, the pepper, and whatever else that I was putting into my breakfast. And there were all these ingredients from all over the world, processed and packaged. And I look over, and right there on my counter fresh from my backyard chickens, was a real egg. And I suddenly stopped and thought, what am I doing? I am trying so hard to replicate something that God already made perfectly. I'm using a dozen ingredients when the answer is right here. I know my chickens, I know what they eat, how they're treated, that they're happy and healthy. And sure, my vegan recipe tasted okay. It was our family favorite, but it wasn't the same. Not nutritionally, not biologically. And there's so much in a real egg, trace minerals, nutrients we don't even have names for yet. No amount of turmeric and tofu can replicate that. And I realized my ancestors would probably look at me like I'd lost my mind. But here's the thing. It wasn't just about the egg on my counter. It was about what was happening to us. We were suffering. We had anxiety, depression, body pain, headaches, exhaustion that wouldn't lift no matter how much I slept. I had arthritis creeping in. My husband was on depression meds. My son had the stutter. My daughter, she'd been having these screaming matches that lasted 1 to 2 hours long daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And whenever something didn't go her way, and we didn't know what to do. My youngest, she was about 1 at the time, so she seemed okay. But looking back, I think she was just too young to tell us what she needed. So I gave my youngest her first real egg, and she lit up and she said, egg. And she would continue to repeat it, egg, egg, egg. She kept saying it over and over. She was obsessed. And we laughed at first, like, okay, I guess she likes it. But it became her constant ask. For months, she ate several eggs a day, multiple times a day. Anytime you asked her what she wanted to eat, the answer was egg, 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 egg. And that obsession, that excitement, it made me realize something. She was obviously missing something. Even with our well-calculated whole food plant-based diet, even with all the key supplements in as well, in their purest form that I could afford to fill in any gaps. But her body knew. And then, within a month of adding eggs and meat back in, everything started to shift. My daughter went from those 1 to 2 hour screaming matches to 5 to 10-minute conversations. There might be crying, there might be a little bit of yelling, but it wasn't physically exhausting every day. We could actually talk through the issue. And my son's stuttering got better. And now it's gone. And I can't believe that just a change in diet did that. My body pain, my arthritis, my anxiety and depression almost completely gone. My husband came off his depression meds 2 weeks into adding meat back, and his anxiety dropped huge. Now, I'm not saying it's all gone forever. After 5 years of damaging ourselves with our diet, we're only 2 years into trying to do it right. And we do fall off. Life happens. The stacks creep back in. The convenience calls to us. And when we do, we fall hard. My daughter gets angry quicker. She takes longer to start to calm down. My son's stuttering starts to come back again. And my youngest gets stuck eating nothing but junk food. My mood drops, my energy fades, I get tired, my body aches, my arthritis kicks back up, my husband's mood and anxiety starts to spike. And then I get that wake up call and I see it all starting to creep back and I'm like, okay, hey, we got to adjust the diet back. We have fallen off too long. It takes time to pull away from that convenience, the junk. But once you're back on track, everyone gets along. Everyone's happier, more energetic, eating really well. And I can't ignore that. So we started eating the eggs. And then eventually we brought pigs onto the farm. And that's where everything really deepened for us. One of the most profound moments for me was when we took the life of our first pig. Now, I know that might sound harsh, but hear me out. We didn't do it lightly. We honored that animal. We used every part we could. Meat for our family, lard for cooking, bones for stock, scraps for our dogs, and the bits we didn't use, we took them to what we called our sacrifice corner. It was at the edge of our property where we offered them back to the land, back to the wild animals, kind of a Thanksgiving, a return to complete the cycle. We hope that by feeding them, they'd be also satisfied enough and leave our chickens alone. But more than that, it felt like participating in the cycle God designed: life and death, taking and giving, honoring the animal that gave its life so we could live. There was something deeply spiritual about that, something our ancestors understood that we've almost entirely lost today. Because yes, animals don't want to die. That argument is still strong. But what I've come to see is this: everything lives and dies. Everything has its path to walk. And when we honor that, when we take life with honor and gratitude, we're not causing meaningless harm. We're participating in the design. When we start eating the way our bodies were made to eat, with real food, nutrient dense food, food we could see the source of, everything shifted. Not overnight, but steadily. And we felt stronger, clearer, and more alive. And I started to wonder, what else had we lost by stepping away from the rhythms that God designed? Unfortunately, as you know, we had to sell our farm. And honestly, it was hard. But it felt like the right choice at the time. While we were trying to decide what to do, God put us on a path that basically failed. But with that failure came information. And the goals we had for the farm, the things we wanted to build, the life we wanted to live, they weren't possible with the mortgage we had, along with other factors. So we had to move. I didn't think it would have much of an impact. I thought, well, we're going to be closer to family. The kids will have their cousins nearby. The UK has farm shops everywhere. Surely we can find that connection again, and eventually we'll get our own farm. But man, do we miss those animals. Do we miss that rhythm and that connection that we had? Working and living in the current system is tiring. It's exhausting, and it makes it so hard to do anything. You tend to get trapped, and we felt that longing to connect back to the land, to the food, and to the cycle that we had back on the farm. But we don't have £1 to £2 million laying around to go buy us a new farm. So I started digging into other ways to bring that connection while living on our quarter-acre rental. I'd end up going to the grocery store and it all felt hollow. Plastic wrapped meat with no story, vegetables flown in from halfway around the world, everything sterile, efficient, disconnected. I tried farm shops, I tried farmers markets, and I was sad to see that the farm shops, though they were supporting local farms, weren't the true local farm shop that I had pictured in my mind, where everything comes from their farm, right there, grown and raised. But I did find a few places, and that's where I get my meat from now. They raise it themselves. And sure, they sell other things, but so much of the food is as local as possible, and I think that's fantastic. And where it isn't possible, they source a little further out. But, thoughtfully, not just to sell stuff. And I love that. Still, it wasn't the same, because what I'd lost wasn't just access to good food. It was that participation. On the farm, I was part of the cycle. I fed the chickens. They gave me eggs. I tended the garden. It fed my family. I honored the pig, and it sustained us through winter. Here, I was just a consumer. Hand over money, take home a package. No relationship, no rhythm, and no sacred exchange. And it started to show up everywhere. I had set up a rhythm for myself, to try and get back into something. Walking the dogs, getting outside, reducing how often I wore my glasses, looking at my phone less, all these little things to stay connected. And then poof, there I was, suddenly working while the kids were at school, but not at home where I could take a minute to do something off my list. It was at a business location. And it was hard. And on a slow day without much to do, it's hard because there's so much my soul is craving. And unfortunately, the job just doesn't fill that anymore. At one point, before where I am currently, I was selling and renting houses. I've always enjoyed being around houses and the whole buying and selling. My parents My dad was a builder. While I was doing that, it didn't fulfill me at all. It just made everything feel ugh. It was all about money. Everybody wanting as much as possible on one side, trying to spend as little as possible on the other side. And the prices just felt made up because really they are. And the whole thing just felt superficial and like this silly game that we're playing for buying and selling houses. And I'd sit at my desk and I'd think, I could be home right now, planting something, cooking something, doing something that actually matters. And when you have 3 kids, when you're tired and sick and fed up, those snacks creep back in, the cakes, the easy foods, the shortcuts, and I don't blame anyone for that. I get it. Life is hard, and doing things differently is hard. But here's what I've noticed, and my husband has noticed it too. The more we fall away from our purpose, from our connection with creation, the more issues and conflict I see in myself. When we step away from the rhythms, when we eat the processed stuff, when we stay inside too long, when we're glued to our screens, we get cranky and annoyed and exhausted. And when we return, even in small ways, we start to feel more peace, connection, fulfillment. And it's not in our heads, it's real. So, if I started doing a little bit of digging, because I like to go down a lot of different rabbit holes, this tends to be what I do a ton of the times. And I wanted to understand, when did we lose this, connection? When did food become convenient? And when did we start demonizing the very things, meat, fat, and butter, that sustained humanity for millennia? And what I found was staggering. So let me take you back, way back, a little history tour here. For most of human history, and I'm talking tens of thousands of years, we were hunter-gatherers, nomadic, and we ate what we could hunt, fish, and forage. Meat, fat, organ meats, occasional plants when they were in season. We were in tune with the land. We followed the animals, we moved with the seasons, and we were strong. Archaeological evidence shows that hunter-gatherers were taller, they had better teeth, stronger bones than what came after them. Then, at about 10,000 years ago, everything changed. The agricultural revolution. We started farming, growing grains, domesticating animals, settling into communities, and in a lot of ways, that was progress. More predictable food, more stability. We could start to settle down, but it also meant less nutrient diversity. More resilience on grains, and for the first time, we started seeing tooth decay, shorter stature, signs of malnutrition in the moans. We traded connection for convenience, and we've been doing it ever since. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, mechanization, mass production, food becomes a commodity, not a relationship. Canning, preserving, transporting. Suddenly, you could eat something that came from halfway around the world. You didn't have to grow it. You didn't know who grew it. You didn't know the soil it even came from. There was so much disconnection. And then came the mid-20th century. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, because this man named Ansel Keys, he did a study called the 7 Countries Study. And he claimed to prove that saturated fat, like butter, lard, and meat, caused heart disease. But the thing is, he cherry-picked his data. He ignored countries that didn't fit his hypothesis, and the science was flawed. But it didn't matter. It became the foundation for the 1977 U.S. dietary guidelines. Eat less fat, eat more carbs. And suddenly, big food had a gold mine. Low food products flooded the market, loaded with sugar to make them taste like something. And traditional fats, butter, lard, and tallow, the fats our ancestors thrived on, they were demonized. And in their place came seed oils. Now, what most people don't know is seed oils, corn oil, soy oil, canola oil, all those kinds of things, they didn't start as food. They were byproducts of other industries, industrial waste, essentially, cotton, soy, corn. They were being processed for other things, and these oils were basically the leftover. So companies needed a way to sell them, and they did. They marketed them as heart healthy, and they pushed people away from traditional fats and toward these healthy processed oils. Healthy, highly processed oils. But if you think about it logically, how is something so heavily processed, extracted with chemicals, they're bleached, deodorized, better for us than something natural we get from simply applying heat, such as rendering fat over fire? It just doesn't make sense, and our bodies know it. Because what happened after 1977? Obesity skyrocketed, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, all these things we were told would decrease if we ate less fat. They exploded. Our ancestors didn't have to count calories, they didn't fear butter and fats, and they weren't dealing with the chronic diseases that we are now because they were eating the way God designed us to eat. Now, I'm a firm believer in the carnivore-based ancestral diet, and I know that might sound extreme to some of you, but here's why I believe it. When you eat nutrient-dense, real food, meat, fat, eggs, organ meats, you eat less because your body is getting more. You're not constantly hungry because you're not constantly deficient. There's a biology to real food that we're only beginning to understand now. Trace minerals, fat-soluble vitamins, nutrients we don't even have names for yet. An egg, for example, isn't just protein and fat. It's a blueprint for life. The egg I made when I was vegan on paper was identical to the egg that came out of a chicken. But we know now that that is not true because there's so many trace elements and minerals and vitamins and biomes and whatever in that natural egg that you do not have in the one that we make. And if you look at a piece of liver, it is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. And honestly, I did know about carnivore when I was a vegan, and I'd heard of it, and I thought it was crazy. But when I started adding meat back, I thought it would just be a reset tool, the way to get my body back on track. And this is when I added more meat, like it was mostly meat, right? But I ended up starting to thrive on it instead. And I watched Dr. Ken Berry, Carnivore Ken, so many people sharing their stories. But really, what encouraged me was my own experience. My body told me the truth. And it isn't just modern science catching up, this is ancient wisdom. Indigenous people lived on meat and fat for millennia and thrived. The Inuit, the Maasai, the Plains tribes of North America, they didn't have access to vegetables year-round. They didn't need them either. In the Bible, God's people ate lamb, fish, butter, honey. Jesus himself ate fish on the shore after his resurrection. The Passover lamb was central to their most sacred meal. Manna in the wilderness, God provided exactly what was needed, no more, no less. Leviticus is full of feasts tied to harvest, but they also include animal sacrifice and eating meat as part of the worship. Proverbs 27:27 says, "You will have plenty of goat's milk to feed your family." In Luke 15, when the prodigal son returns, the father says, "Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate." And Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10, "Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it." Across face, there's this thread of reverence for the animal. In Judaism, kosher laws honor the animal, humane slaughter, draining the blood, not mixing meat and dairy. Shabbat meals often include meat as sacred, and in Islam, halal practices require the animal to be healthy and slaughtered with prayer, treated with respect. Eid al-Adha, I can't pronounce that, so please don't come at me, is the festival of sacrifice, which honors Abraham's willingness to sacrifice, and the meat is shared with family and the poor. Now, there's a lot of controversy around halal and kosher type of slaughters. People see it as cruel, but I want to kind of change that narrative a little bit while I brought it up. In the UK, the law requires stunning the animal first. It's meant to be humane. But the thing is if you stun an animal and it can no longer move, it doesn't drain as well, and it can can't tell you if you messed up, if you didn't kill it right. If you slit the throat of a chicken or shoot an animal without stunning, you know if you messed up, and you can remedy it quickly and you can make it right. That flapping and the twitching that they show you all over those vegan videos and stuff, that's part of death. It's not them in pain. It's just muscle memory and reaction as such. And I think we should be part of that. We should feel that discomfort, and in return, we will honor that animal. I saw an article once that talked about how stressed and disconnected people who worked in the slaughterhouses are. And it used this as an argument for why we shouldn't kill animals at all. But the reality is that we're not meant to slaughter hundreds of animals a day. Personally, that's too much. We can't handle that. We're not designed for mass killings. We're designed to hunt, to take one deer, to eat it that week, and then go get something else when we need it. And the problem isn't taking life. The problem is the industrial scale of it all and that disconnection that we're making, and the industry constant thousands of animals going through the system, that we lose that relationship. In Hinduism, while many are vegetarian, some traditions include meat. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Bhagavad Gita speaks of offering food to God before eating, whether plant or animal. It's about intention, about gratitude. And the indigenous traditions, there's deep reverence for the animal spirit, prayers of gratitude before the hunt, using every part of it, the buffalo to the Plains tribes, for example, the seals to the Inuit, is sacred and it's life-giving. Different voices keep coming back to the same truth. When we take life, we do it with honor, with gratitude, with recognition, and that this is sacred. It's a sacred time. And here's where I want to kind of pause and address something important. A lot of people kind of talk about this return to Eden, especially in vegan circles and stuff. And I understand the appeal. Genesis 1 says, God gives us plants to eat. The garden was peaceful, abundant, and perfect. But here's something we kind of miss from it, Eden was a locked away garden. Adam and Eve were eternal beings. They didn't need to eat. Food was for enjoyment, not survival. There was no death, no decay, no cycle of life and death. But we're no longer in Eden anymore. After the fall, God sent us into the world, and he gave us a new command. Genesis 1:28. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on the earth. And then after the flood, in Genesis 9:3, God says this, everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I give you the green plants, I now give you everything. We're not called back to Eden. We're called to shepherd the earth, to tend it, to participate in the ecosystem, to take life with honor and gratitude, and to give thanks. This isn't about going back to some mythical paradise where we never have to make our choices. It's about stepping into the role God designed for us here in the world we actually live in today. And when we do that, when we honor the animal, we tend to the land, and we eat what God provided, we're not just feeding our bodies, we're participating in his design. We're living in what some call the anima mundi, the spirit woven through all of creation. Now, I know that sounds a little woo-woo, and honestly, when I first heard that phrase, I thought, oh no, is this some new age thing? I'm not about to sing Kumbaya on a mountaintop and asking people to hug trees, But the more I sat with it, the more I realized this isn't some new age idea where everything is divine in itself. It's that God's spirit is in all he made. His fingerprints are on everything, and he's holding it all together. Colossians 1:16-17 says, for in him all things were created, and in him all things hold together. It's not woo-woo to say that you feel God in the wind and the dirt under your feet and the food on your table. It's biblical. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Psalm 24:1. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about all these woo woo practices people talk about, grounding mats, nature retreats, digital detoxes? Aren't those just like trendy things? But here's the thing, we wouldn't need those things if we hadn't lost the rhythm in the first place. Our ancestors didn't need grounding mats. They were barefoot in the dirt, and they didn't need nature retreats because they lived in nature. They didn't need to unplug, there's nothing to plug into. So their bodies were already in sync with the sunrise and sunset. The hands were in the soil, their eyes were up in the sky. Now, I'll be honest, we tried some of these things. We had grounding sheets for our beds, and it kind of worked, I guess. We saw a slight adjustment to our long list of issues that we were having at the time, but we gave up on them eventually. Our cat chewed through some wires, that kind of thing. And I had barefoot shoes, those toe shoes that make people look at your feet weird. And honestly, I love those. They made my walking better, running better. And I do eventually want to get another pair. But here's what I kind of realized. Those things helped a little, but the real shift that came from changing our diet and from reconnecting to the rhythms, from eating real food and going outside and unplugging from screens. When we return to even a fraction of what our ancestors knew, when we go outside, when we cook from scratch, when we eat real food, when we rest with the rhythms of the day, we start to feel it because we're returning to the designer. So, what does that look like for us here now in the modern world? Because let's be honest, we can't all move to a farm tomorrow, and we can't all go back to the nomadic hunter gatherer lifestyles. We have bills to pay, and kids to raise, and jobs to show up to. But we can bring pieces of that rhythm back. Right now, I'm on a quarter-acre that we're renting, and we're limited in what we can do, but we can have chickens, and that's the plan for the spring, along with a garden. And even now, even without those things yet, we still have so much available to us. We have conker trees, ivy growing, acorns everywhere, and I learned to make my own laundry soap with the conkers, and it works great. Ivy you can make dish soap with, and acorns you can even make flour if you have the patience. We have so many natural things available to us right here, right now. And yet it's funny when I see people post about these things online that they're doing and making their own soap, that kind of stuff. So many of the comments in their feeds are, why bother with all that when you can just go buy eco soap? Or I heard it's bad for the washing machine. That's where, that's what they'll have you believe, really. So we're so used to this convenience and so used to these lies told over time that if I take a bunch of nuts, the animals won't have food that we're taking from the environment. But what do they think they're taking when they buy from the shop? It too comes from the environment, and usually in much more terrible ways. We've been conditioned to think participation is pointless, that it's easier to just buy it. And maybe it is easier in that moment, which it is, it's just quick, but it is costing us down the road. And I keep searching for local farms and visiting them, testing their food through trial and error, really. And I found the ones that do the foods we like, the ones that raise their animals well, and the ones we can trust. And now I'm trying to get back into having storage. I want to be able to spend a week buying half a lamb, another week half a pig, and another a quarter cow, and then eat that animal, right? But honor it and use it fully, know its story, and that's the rhythm I'm kind of reaching for. And these little things like making your laundry soap from conkers is a start. And here's what I'm also kind of realizing is this isn't just about me and my family. This is the way forward for us as a species. Imagine if everyone grew even just a little bit of their own food. If everyone bought from their local farmer, and if we shared our abundance with our neighbors. Food would become cheaper. It would be more nutritious because it doesn't have to travel and sit in storage. It would be more connected because we would know the people who are handling our food, would see it growing down the road, would know um, would know the land it came from, the people who grew it, would teach our kids where food actually comes from. It's not a package, but it's from the earth, the animal, and the farmer's hands, and would be stronger as individuals, as families, as communities, as nations, because when we return to the primal rhythms, the ones God designed, we become more resilient, more grounded, more alive. We'd stop being so dependent on systems that don't care about us, and would stop being so fragile, so disconnected, and so sick. Would have roots again. So often, we want something and we don't want to give it away. If we have excess apples, we want to earn money from that. And sure, if you're selling a lot and making an income, that's one thing. But if it's just a few extra apples, what if we just shared them? What if I gave my excess apples to Bob? And Bob shared his corn with me. And Sally shared some lamb. Together we start to make this food system that feeds us, feeds our community, feeds our neighbor. We're so often sold on the idea of this feeding the world, solving world hunger. And don't get me wrong, hunger is real. But the problem of world hunger isn't our problem. Our problem is our neighbor's hunger. Jesus said it quite plainly. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:39. Not your neighbor across the ocean, your neighbor, the person right next to you. And the early church, they lived this out. Acts 2 says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. They didn't wait for a big organization to solve it. They didn't send money overseas to call it done. They looked around and said, who here is hungry? Who here needs help? And they shared. Acts 4 says it even more clearly. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. There was no needy persons among them. No needy persons among them. Not because they solved world hunger, but because they took care of each other. And Proverbs 11 says, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. That's the rhythm. That's the design. Once we solve that, once we make sure the people right next to us are fed, then we can move to bigger issues. We help the next town do the same. And eventually that sparks the world to have food abundance. But we're too often told we need to solve the big problem because that seems hard to do. It needs technology, it needs big companies, it needs a lot of money, systems we cannot control. And so the problem is taken out of our hands. We don't have to worry about it. We can keep doing what we're doing. It's time to change that. Because the truth is, the big problems get solved when we solve the small one, right here, right now, with the people we can see. And I truly believe that's what God is calling us back to, not backwards to some impossible path, but forward into the design He intended all along. I'm going to be really honest with you, this is hard, especially when you're juggling 3 kids, especially when you're tired or sick or fed up. Those snacks creep back in, the shortcuts call your name, and some days you just don't have it in you. And that's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Every small step back towards the rhythm is a step back towards God. We don't have to do it all. You don't have to have chickens and a garden to make your own soap and buy a quarter cow. Just start with one thing. Even as simple as looking up at the sky. I know, right? It sounds so simple, but when was the last time you actually looked up and sat there for a while and noticed the clouds, the light, the way the day shifts? Go outside barefoot when you can. Let the kids play in the dirt. Breathe fresh air. Find a local farm, one where you can see the animals, ask questions, know their names, where you can buy meat and know exactly where it came from. Cook from scratch. Not perfectly, not every meal, but more than current. And when you do, you'll feel it. The kids will feel it. There's something about food made with your own hands and unplugging from social media, or at least trying to, because the more I tend to scroll and scroll, the endless scroll, the more disconnected I feel. You can already hear my phone in the background probably bringing its head off. So grow something small. Herbs on a windowsill, tomatoes in a pot. Let your kids see food come from the earth, not just a package. Say grace with attention, not just bless this food, but thank God for the animal that gave its life, for the hands that grew the vegetables, for the sun and rain that made it possible. Let your kids hear you honor the source. You don't have to do all of it. Just start with one, and once that's comfortable, add another. And when you feel that peace and that connection, that rightness, you'll know, your body will know, and your soul will know. So this week, I want to invite you to do one thing. And it doesn't require anything extra. No candles, no special setup, just you and God in the middle of your ordinary. While you're washing the dishes, hands in the warm water, ask him, what rhythm are you calling me back to? And listen. Let that quiet speak. We have such a tendency of trying to find the answer ourselves and going, okay, well, la 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 la, and just talking and rambling, but on that school run in the car or going for a walk, have a conversation with him. Not a formal prayer, just talk. Like he's standing right beside you, because he is. God, I felt that peace when I cooked from scratch yesterday. I felt cranky when I scrolled too long. What are you showing me? Or maybe it's even simpler than that. Maybe you just ask him a question in the morning, one question, and then you wait the whole day for a response, just listening, paying attention to what comes up, what you notice, what he might be saying to you through the ordinary day. At the dinner table before you eat, pause for just a breath. Look at your food, thank God. Not just for the food, but for the design, for the animal, for the plant, for the farmer, for the soil, for the rain. Let your kids hear you honor that source, right? You don't have to have it all figured out, and I don't either. But I know this. When we return to how we're designed to live, to eat, to move, to rest, to connect, we return to the designer. And that, friend, is where the quiet hallelujahs are. Looking back, I see now that losing the farm wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a deeper question. How do I live this way here now? And I'm still figuring it out. But we've come such a long way, and we're not perfect. We still mess up. We're working day by day towards a goal of being more connected, more in tune. And some days are better than others. But every step back towards that rhythm, every real meal, every moment outside, every conversation with God in the ordinary brings me closer. Not to Eden, but to my purpose, to the role God gave us when he said, go shepherd the earth. And I believe that's where he's calling all of us. Not backwards to a paradise we can't return to, but forwards into a design he intended all along. This has been a quiet hallelujah, and I'm Caroline, so thank you so much for walking this path with me today. If this has stirred something in you, I'd love for you to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We release every Tuesday morning. What's stirring in your heart? What rhythms are you longing to return to? Share your journey, your thoughts. Maybe together we can figure out where to go from here. And if you'd like more personal support creating your own rhythms of faith, food, and peace, I offer one-to-one coaching, and you can find me over at quiethallelujah.com. Until next time, may you find God in the ordinary, and may your table be a place of thanksgiving. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the next episode on Tuesday. Bye.
Jesus, could you show me your fire and your smoke? Or maybe like Moses, you could give a magic cloak. Just something to know you're there. What am I supposed to do when days turn into weeks and seasons of waiting, and I don't hear you speak like we did when we were becoming friends? Is it you, or is it me? get hurt when I doubted you last week? Maybe I'm numb, but I still believe that you forgive, even though wandering. 'Cause we got roots like a willow tree. The hard times that you stuck with me, so remember me. It's funny, when I was empty, there was no cost at all. But now that you've blessed me, I'm not as quick to hear your call. I guess you always knew this, that's why you're slow to give. I'm trusting you remember from your days of walking earth what it feels to have a spirit and a flesh that makes you work. Can you still make a Peter out of someone like me? Is it you? Is it me? Did you get hurt when I doubted you last week? Maybe I'm numb, but I still believe that you forgive, even my wanderings. 'Cause we got roots like a willow tree. The hard times that you stuck with me, so remember me. A willow tree with hard times they